After nearly 9 years, we're getting our first playable taste of Final Fantasy XV with episode Duske. 15 looks like the most promising Final Fantasy in a while, with other recent titles dividing the fandom. We fondly remember the series' golden age, spanning its birth on the NES to Final Fantasy X on the PlayStation 2. Make no mistake, we're excited for 15, but we've been hurt before. So here are a few lessons we think it can learn from the series' classic titles. The overworld is key in a good RPG. Classic Final Fantasy titles took this to heart, building sprawling maps that made the world feel huge and lived in. Many allowed you to traverse them on foot, searching for the forest, cave, or city in which your next objective sat. Some areas had side quests where you could glean some extra gil, experience points, and even new characters. But more recent titles, notably 13, are linear to the point of being hallways guiding you from point A to point B. There is a thrill to running around green fields as Zidane in Final Fantasy IX, or jumping on an airship to another continent in 6. Giving players the freedom to explore and discover things on their own added depth to the experience. From what we've seen of 15, it looks like a semi-linear experience. We do know you can walk or drive across the entire map, and the demo features the party roaming freely in large areas. What we don't know is if areas will be blocked off until the story progresses there. Previous games bent these rules a bit, allowing you to familiarize yourself with places that wouldn't become a big deal until later. One of the best examples of this is how Final Fantasy IX treats introducing playable character Quina Quen. Quina lives in Q's Marsh, a tiny area accessible early on, but not important until halfway through Disc 1. If you go to the marsh after wrapping up things in Lindblum, you can recruit Quina. However, you can also choose to avoid the marsh until after completing 3 more areas, during which time you can get Quina pretty much whenever. Depending on when you recruit Quina, the story changes. And you could recruit not 1 but 2 optional characters in Final Fantasy VII, Yuffie and Vincent, which also impacted the story. This kind of non-linearity gives you more control in what is already a highly scripted story. It's immersive in ways guiding characters down a singular path is not, even if you jam that hallway with pit stops for cutscenes. It also makes side quests and activities feel more organic. You can play Blitzball anytime you go to Luca in Final Fantasy X. You can breed chocobos at your leisure in 7. And don't forget Triple Triad and Tetramaster, the in-game collectible card battling games in 8 and 9. Populating a world with smaller activities that don't involve saving it makes things feel more real, more complete. So what are the implications of 15's one giant map? Does this mean everything will be open from the start, similar to the first part of 9? Or will we be limited by the narrative? Final Fantasy is known for its colorful casts. Protagonists, antagonists, NPCs. You watch them fight, struggle, and sometimes die. Strong characters are vital, because if your character is weak sauce, your audience's interest in powering through their adventure will be watery too. 15's Noctis appears to be the primary focus as far as characters go, and if he's going to be up front, he should be the most complex. His most recent predecessor, Lightning, is a badass in her own right, but most of the time, that's her only speed. Remember Cloud's horrible PTSD after watching his friend die, and then he lived as his friend, mixing up his own memories and leading a genuinely painful existence to watch, let alone play through? We need that. A protag that's relatable but not boring. Complicated but not untouchable. Also key, a good bad guy. We don't quite know who the big baddie is in 15, but we're hoping he or she recalls those who came before. Like Kefka Palazzo, the sassy mage in clown makeup who destroyed the world with a smile in 6. He's the perfect balance of entertaining and threatening. Chaotic evil at its finest. When he was on screen, it was all about him, but when he wasn't, you still felt his ominous presence looming over all. The triple threat of Jecht, Seymour, and Yu Yevon in 10 did it as well. 10 did an excellent job of building up a multi-tiered menace, presenting danger from all sides and taking the entire game to unravel the emotional complications that came with it. 7 did this too. A disturbed guy with a sword seeking out his own brand of justice, and on top of that, the less than well-intentioned Shinra Corporation? Rufus and the Turks were interesting, complex, another thing to worry about, but another set of characters you couldn't wait to encounter. Recent Final Fantasy games haven't had the most interesting or relatable or understandable villains. Caius Ballad came close in Final Fantasy XIII too, with his brooding vow to save his only friend from an eternity of torment. But Lightning Returns watered down his madness, making his final confrontation more cheesy than cathartic. We're hoping that 15 can learn from this, setting up a complex antagonistic presence and pinning players under non-stop pressure. That brings us to a point that latter-day Final Fantasies have struggled with. We need narratives with meaningful complexity. Final Fantasy XII was a reskinned, less interesting Star Wars. The 13 trilogy could have been a solid story, but was thinned out across too many games. And these stories always start with the opening cutscene. The first 10 minutes of a game are crucial to conveying tone and setting the stage in terms of what players can expect. Many Final Fantasy titles go right for the cold open. See Final Fantasy VI and the March of the Magitech Armor, 7's bombing mission, 8's Liberi Fatale. You remember those cutscenes, they're what hooked you. When Sin crashed the Blitzball game, those first notes of Otherworld stuck with you forever. If you're going to demand a 50+ hour investment for one game, you need a multi-level plot with even pacing. Final Fantasy VII has great narrative design. You have Cloud, who is part of an eco-terrorism group trying to take down a mega-corporation harvesting the world's energy to power civilization, which is also killing the planet. Cloud used to work for said corporation, and while there lost one friend to death and another to madness. His repressed memories bubble up through the entire game, and every character you roll into your party has deep investment in the story's outcome or something riding on the narrative. As a player, we require characters to be invested in their own game. Otherwise, why would we? And peppered throughout all of this, of course, are powerful scenes. Moments of dramatic tension, segments that make you tingly. These are the high points, pieces that never leave you. Finding out Sin is your dad and then having to kill your own summons. Garnet forgiving Queen Brane as she lies dying on the beach. Eris's death. Cele's suicide attempt, the opera scene. These moments work because they're populated with strong characters. You have to give a character life before you can throw them into a high-tension situation or kill them off. It's why it was hard to care when Sarah turned into a crystal in 13. She was boring, whatever. But with the franchise's almost 30 years of lessons learned, Final Fantasy XV is poised to stab us through the heart once more. Final Fantasy XV already has us trembling with optimism. We hope Square Enix has been listening to its fans and reached back into the series' history for elements that worked well before. There's a lot of potential here for Final Fantasy XV, so long as developers aren't afraid to listen to its predecessors.